Arc 6, Chapter 8, Baptism of the Sand Dunes. The morning of their departure had arrived. One day had been allocated for rest, and it was now 2 days after the prior arrangements and the information gathering. At the entrance to the town of Marula, Subaru and the others had gathered with their respective equipment on, having finished their preparations to cross the sand dunes. Gazing at the dragon carriage, Subaru let out a sigh of admirable.
Wow, this is...
A ground dragon across the sand dunes. The Gyre species is one that shines on sandy soil. Their species is adapted to sand, wind, and dryness alike, characterized by large figures and a gentle demeanor. You will find that this endemic species has an easy-to-handle nature.
Subaru looked at the ground dragons tied to the dragon carriage with eyes widened. Julius added an explanation. They had to break through the Aguria sand dunes so that they could reach Pleiades Watchtower. The legs of a typical ground dragon would not be capable of dealing with the difficulty of treading that path filled with sand. Therefore, they'd exchanged the ground dragons that had brought them this far via the road, and now would have to use the Gyre species of ground dragons, endemic to this land, to carve open a path.
Endemic, huh? There were water dragons in Pristella too, but wow, the world sure is big.
Folding his arms, Subaru gazed at the yellow-skinned ground dragon connected to the dragon carriage right in front of him. Subaru had already spent more than a year in this world. His initial surprise towards the ground dragons had faded, and he had thought he would never again feel excitement like what he had felt at first. But he'd been too narrow-minded. A yellow ground dragon, with thorn-like scales all over its body, and a flat head. It had a physique similar to Otto's beloved dragon, Frou-Frou, which was of a species with excellent stamina even among ground dragons. Its owner had boasted that it was capable of traveling for 3 days and 3 nights. It would perhaps be similar to the Triceratops that Subaru knew. On the other hand, attempting to examine the ground dragon before him, with knowledge similar to his, would have a person finding the yellow dragon resembling an ankylosaurus. However, their tails were short, so unlikely to be able to be used as a weapon. Also, what was more of a defining characteristic of theirs, more so their skin and general looks, were their feet. Every end of their 4 thick, short legs were round, and their sharp claws acted like spikes which moored their bulking bodies to the ground.
It sure does look like their hooves can cause permanent damage to anything they step on.
The grains found in the Aguria sand dunes are fine particles. Without feet like this, there would be the possibility of slipping off slopes. People say that the Gyre species' feet changed to adapt that.
So they adapted to the desert areas, eh? So now we have replacements for horses and camels, but what about water dragons? Thinking back, it's not like I've seen animals pull boats back to the original world.
He went into deep thought, and a swan boat came to Subaru's mind. But that was just a boat imitating the form of swan, and ran on man-made power. He'd never heard of a custom in which crocodiles or hippos pulled on boats, so he couldn't think of any replacement for water dragons. Even beyond that...
These dragons adapted to sandy soil are going there, but can we really bring my Patrasche to a place like that? Can't do anything unreasonable with the lady of the camp.
Your beloved dragon belongs to the Diana species, which is considered the ancestor of all ground dragons. The founding forefather dragon, dominant on land, sea, and air, is present in her lineage. It has excellent adaptability no matter what the environment is. Unfortunately, my Shaknar will have to be left at the town.
Julius answered Subaru's question, then looked up toward the inn with a look of loneliness. Shaknar was Julius's beautiful, beloved, blue-skinned ground dragon. It was a loving dragon, but it had forgotten about Julius, who had had his name eaten by gluttony. However, this well-trained dragon would be polite to anyone that rode it, at all times. Even at their one-way introduction at Pristella, it had been accepting of Julius right away, and it seemed that during the month-and-a-half-long trip, an intimate bond, much like the one from before, had been formed. For that very reason, he had what one could call feelings of shame for leaving that beloved dragon at the town.
Nevertheless, For your beloved dragon to be the lady you use most out of all the people around you, I do not know if I should praise you for knowing how to use your ground dragon, or if I should complain about your evaluation of the women around you.
Actually, you shouldn't make light of how much feminine charm Patrasche has.
Moment, Julius had looked emotional and had covered that up with a cutting remark. Subaru could sense those feelings and had quickly gone along with it. Seeing that, Julius went to greet the ground dragon whose reins he would be holding. In response, Subaru turned to the dragon carriage, stepped towards it, and knocked on the door.
So, the interior of the dragon carriage will be left as is, but the wheels have been replaced and...
Subaru inspected the remodeled dragon carriage before there was an answer to his knock. The only changes that stood out, however, were in the carriage's lower body. The wheels and window frames had been installed with protections against the sand wind. This dragon carriage, which had been devised for long-distance journeys, was something like an RV with its multi-purpose features. Inside and at the front of the carriage, there was a row of seats, and the middle and back sides were exceptionally good to simply relax. On top of it ensuring comfort, it could hold up to 10 people. Subaru had honestly been surprised by how the dragon carriage easily surpassed his initial expectations.
Even without any electricity or electrical appliances, magic stones are able to replace those tools. Humans really are creatures that seek convenience anywhere.
I do not know what you are talking about so seriously, but are the preparations finished, Barasu?
While he puzzled at the exterior, the dragon carriage's door opened, and a cold voice poured down at the same time. Turning around, there was Rom, standing up from the seat closest to the door, looking down on Subaru.
Well, the other preparations were finished yesterday, so it's ready. Next we've got to prepare our hearts and bodies, but I'm also done with that. Are you?
Let's see. Considering how many days we will be in this carriage, no amount of care will quell the feeling of lack of safety. Rom will not cry for help like a delicate person in the middle of the sand dunes, even if attacked.
It'll be fine. Don't worry.
Rom narrowed her eyes and gave Subaru a meaningful look. Emilia, having heard them speaking, showed her face. She seemed to have been cleaning the back of the carriage before walking up to Rom and placing a hand on her shoulder.
No matter what attacks us, I'll protect everyone in here. Subaru and Julius will be there outside too, so we got everything covered.
You are reassuring as always. See? Look, Ram! Emilia-tan agrees, so don't worry.
Yes, Emilia-sama, Rom is very reassured as well. However, it will not just be malicious beings that attack us. Among us, there are also those with evil desires.
Spoke meaningful words, while directing a meaningful look at Subaru. Once Subaru understood Rom's look and the underlying message in her words, he frowned immediately.
You're still doubting me like that? Even after spending close to 1 month of peaceful nights? There's no way I could do something like that with you around. I don't have that type of courage.
It is pathetic how you are insisting that with such a loud voice. It's not unthinkable for you to lose control of yourself because of the beauty within the carriage. Rom is always afraid. Sympathize with a maiden's heart.
Always afraid? Not always threatening people?
Rom basically repeating the saying that boys and girls should be separated once they turn 7 caused Subaru's voice to shake. Incidentally, Emilia did nothing but tilt her head in confusion. Emilia was EMT, and Rom was being insolent, same as always. However, there was something bothering him, and Subaru scratched his head energetically.
Nae-sama, are you doing alright, physically?
Weird question. Is something wrong?
Your worry is unfounded, but is mine? I just want to make sure.
What a cheeky Barasu, showing such concern.
She did not have a pale face, and it didn't seem like she was having trouble breathing, and while Rom appeared to be acting like her usual self, she had not denied Subaru's words. She did not act tough, nor had she attempted to hide it. In that sense, Rom was being surprisingly sincere.
Looks like your wicked tongue doesn't have its usual sharpness. If your body's condition really is bad, then...
After having spent 20 days to reach this place, you expect me to stomp my feet with the adjective this close at hand? It is the same as usual, but today you are being particularly ridiculous.
Ram, don't speak like that.
Ram interrupted Subaru, directing him an even fiercer look. Emilia raised her eyebrows at that girl's behavior, putting hands on her hips like she was angry. Standing next to Ram, she pointed her hand towards Subaru while being next to Ram and spoke.
Subaru is worried about you, Ram. I am too. Every day I'm giving you the treatment Roswell told me about. But
I'm still unsure if you can call it treatment, but it's not like it's your specialty. Even if Emilia-tan and Bayako both do it, they can't do it as well as Roswell.
Not trying to use that as a reason. I do not want to be a hindrance.
We're worried, you know?
If you were the usual Barasu, then I could fool you.
You aren't the usual Ram, so you can't fool me.
They weren't inflammatory tit-for-tat words, nor were they comebacks. Regardless, there was a quiet exchange of words, and Ram bit her lip, seemingly displeased at the way Subaru spoke. However, there was a lack of vigor in the eyes she stared at him with. She probably was aware of it herself. Ram let out a sigh and looked inside of the carriage. There was a wheelchair right next to her seat, a single girl placed in it. The space had been remodeled to allow the wheelchair to be placed there, by removing the dragon carriage's seat. Their interactions did not disturb the sleeping girl, and so she remained there, in slumber.
I shall not be left behind. Also, it's not like my pain will improve if I do. In fact, being separated from Emilia-sama with how I am now would put my life at risk. You trying to kill me?
Calm down. I never even said a single word about leaving you behind since the beginning. Also, if you were to be left behind, Emilia-tan would be too.
Subaru, there's no way I'd let that happen.
Like I said, it's fine. I just want to check on Ram.
What do you want to check?
Didn't I say it?
Subaru gave a wry smile, as his earlier words had been forgotten because they had repeatedly jumped to conclusions. Seeing Emilia and Ram exchanging doubtful glances, Subaru continued.
Ram, we can tell that you aren't your usual self. So, if there's something wrong, say it. Don't try to hide stuff and fool us. Even if you do stuff like that, we'll still help you. Even if you don't like it.
Huh.
Pointed his finger at Ram and affirmed that. Ram made a rare look of shame. Emilia put her hand on her mouth at her side and let out a smile unintentionally, unable to stop herself. That first urge to laugh, however, was warded off, and Emilia merely relaxed her lips, looking pleased.
I think that side of Subaru is really nice.
Did you just fall in love with me again?
Don't talk like that with Rem sleeping in front of you, women's toxic enemy.
Woman's toxic enemy? Not just woman's enemy?
Ram snorted her nose with a huh, prompting Subaru's voice to trail off into the distance. After that, she stretched her slender legs and recklessly tried to kick Subaru off of the dragon carriage's steps.
Oh, hey! What are you doing? I'm going to fall!
Putting aside your falling, Barasu should normally be outside, not inside. Mount the private ground dragon and frantically guarantee our carriage's safety. Go on. Hurry.
What do you mean, hurry? Listen to what I have to...
I have listened to what I must, so go.
Ram asserted herself with a firm voice and delivered an even firmer kick. Having gotten a punt to the thigh, Subaru descended in dejection, and just before he stepped away from the dragon carriage, he exchanged looks with Emilia. She responded to him by giving an acknowledging gesture with her chin, which had an "I understand" meaning.
Guess it's fine for now. But either way, you should...
Go!
A kick that felt like a surprise attack connected with his solar plexus, and Subaru fell off the dragon. Ram hurriedly shut the carriage's door, suddenly looking at Emilia as she let out a sigh. Then she spoke.
Emilia-sama, why are you making that look?
No, it's nothing. But I just thought about how you're kind of cute.
That is a surprising opinion. How cheeky of Emilia-sama.
Being teased, Ram's tongue slipped, eliciting a rare sight of her cheeks being stiffened to be seen. Emilia witnessed that change in Ram's facial expression and smiled, appearing to become more and more happy.
Finally. Finally feel like showing that face to me too? The one you always show to Subaru?
It was a slip of the mind. Please forgive my impoliteness.
I'm not really angry. I'm actually a little happy. It almost feels like you're trusting me when you do that. I was a little jealous of Subaru.
Rom kept silent for a bit in response to Emilia's innocent reply. Immediately after that, with a dumbfounded look while smoothing her hair, Rom said,
Emilia-sama, you have changed as well. When we first met, you only seemed like someone with resolve that was hard but fragile. Like glass.
Do I look a little stronger now?
Now, I think you are like sweet glass turned into candy.
Wow, Ram. You're harsh.
Emilia was smacked by Rom's abusive words, and her voice finally boomed from being unable to bear it. And in that manner, the girls resumed talking with each other inside the dragon carriage. After a few hours, the conquest of the Augurian sand dunes began. They had become acquainted with the sandy soil after 1 hour in the dragon carriage. They were approximately 10 kilometers east of the town of Marula. With the dry sand and miasma-laden wind growing stronger, and the prairie at their feet changing to desert, they had finally entered the Augurian sand dunes proper. Their setup was made up of one dragon carriage and a ground dragon of the Gyrus species to pull it. Running off to the side was Subaru riding Patrasche, trekking along the sandy soil. The flat-faced ground dragon wasn't fast, but its heavy pacing gave off a feeling of stability. At first, Patrasche had seemed wary of her weird companion, but after a few hours of traveling together, it was as if she'd found a compromise with her partner, and dissatisfaction was not to be found on her highly prideful face. If I had to describe it, then I'd probably say that the dissatisfaction of this ground dragon is because of Betty, in fact. It was Beatrice, completely settled in Subaru's arms. While holding the bridle and onto the curled-up girl, Subaru said, "No," as he shook his head.
That's not right! Patrasche isn't such an intolerant dragon.
Subaru, it'd be wise of you to become more careful of how you perceive those around you, I suppose.
She let out those words, grabbing onto the edge of her skirt as she sat sideways on the jet-black ground dragon. Subaru's dragon riding skills were a lot better than they were before. Up to this point, he had been simply spoiled by Patrasche's consideration, but now he was at the level of a dragon rider apprentice. He sat on the saddle and held onto the bridle. Beatrice was in front of him, and he made sure to hold onto her from behind. They almost looked like experts at riding together. Of course, the only ground dragon Subaru would ride was Patrasche, and this wasn't the first time he rode her along with Beatrice. Thus, Beatrice was being too paranoid, no matter how he looked at it. That's what he wanted to say.
Very prideful ground dragons don't want to let anyone other than their owner to ride them, in fact. This ground dragon of Subaru's is extraordinary. One of a kind, I suppose. If I were alone, she definitely wouldn't let me ride her, in fact.
Isn't that just because you're bad at riding ground dragons?
If that was the reason, then you getting close with this ground dragon would make sense, I suppose.
It was just as she said. If Patrasche liked a person based on their dragon riding skills, then Subaru should have failed the first test. Since that had not come to pass, there was a reason as to why this lady approved of Subaru. And in truth, Patrasche's actual treatment towards everyone but Subaru was relatively harsh.
Well, not knowing why you're liked really is a bad thing.
True, in fact. Subaru doesn't have the looks to be liked for no reason, I suppose.
In other words, you have firm reasons to love me?
Of course, Betty is... Just what are you trying to make me say?
They were glued together, so we couldn't dodge Beatrice's assault, her face beet red. While getting struck lightly by her weak palm, Subaru said, "Whoa," in an attempt to appease Beatrice. Then, Patrasche raised her upper body and shook them, as if displeased with the behavior they were displaying on her back.
Oh, what the?
As she had set her posture in a way that was like doing a wheelie on a bike, Subaru reflexively held tight onto Beatrice. Normally, they would not feel any swaying from the dragon, or even the wind because of the divine protection of wind evasion. but certain extreme movements like the one just now would have effect, as well as things like angle changes from sudden turning. The harassment was based on understanding of those characteristics. When Subaru put in his objection and glared at the back of Patrasche's head, the ground dragon looked at Subaru and Beatrice for a second, squinting her eyes as if saying,
She's kind of like Ram, considering just how haughty she is. Seems like they'd get along, surprisingly.
Or maybe they clash with each other and they wouldn't come to an agreement at all, I suppose.
Subaru and Beatrice exchanged deep thoughts and nodded at each other. Then,
Subaru, Beatrice-sama, it is splendid seeing you guys being friendly with each other, but this would be a good time to put yourselves together in earnest.
a voice speaking out from the side was sent towards the two, who acted relaxedly. At the driver box of the dragon carriage traveling alongside them, there was Julius, in charge of the reins. Rather than the fact that he was not alone, it seemed that the role of coachman was unpleasant and not very fitting for Julius, but he didn't act like he cared about it. That being said, perhaps he did not have time to worry about that. Either way, at his side there was...
I don't mind Oni-san and Beatrice-chan being friendly with each other, but if I'm ignored too much, I'll pout.
Having stated those words, giving them a look that didn't fit her appearance, Meili, sitting. Meili was an essential member to deal with the witch beast, and they would have to always use her for conquering the Agoria sand dunes. Thus, as a lookout for the witch beasts living at the sand dunes, Meili was at the place where it would be easiest for her to deal with them. In other words, she was standing by the driver box at the front of the dragon carriage. Julius took up the role of staving off her boredom.
You have the knight next to your side to escort you. He's much more smart, stylish, and elegant than me.
I didn't get more than half of what you've said. Plus, I'm fine with Knight-sama. I'm unhappy with Oni-chan.
With me?
With her braided hair, Meili glared at Subaru, her cheeks swollen in a pout.
Oni-san made me come along, so he must be forced to deal with me.
Don't say such unreasonable, childish things. As you can see, that place is filled with Bayako, right?
Appeared to shrug her shoulders in resentment, and Subaru looked at Meili again. Pouting was a suitable reaction for her age, but her mood would have a big influence from now on down the road. Considering that, it would be bold to make light of Meili. However, saying that really would make things unmanageable.
You're quite right. However, we'll have you fulfill your role first before you could say if it's a right or a duty.
My role?
We'll be entering the most favoured Agoria sand dunes soon. I don't think the witch beast will suddenly roar when we enter them, but when it does happen, calming them down will be up to you, Meili. You get that, right?
Yes. For someone who spoils Beatrice-chan, Oni-san sure is a bully.
He wasn't being a bully to her, but even if he was taken as one, he would just have to cajole her. Subaru felt like Beatrice seemed satisfied, looking at her with a side glance, and then raised his hand at Julius. After that, Julius quietly acknowledged, gesturing with his chin. Unfortunately for him, he would have to be the little lady's sycophant. Moreover...
Subaru.
Oh, I see it.
Beatrice called out to him quietly, while Patrasche gave a faint neigh as she glared at what lay in front. Those actions brought back his focus, and Subaru squinted. He saw the tower, its contours so clear that it would be impossible to miss them from Marula. Likewise, the surface of the sand surrounding that tower was visible. Their magnificent arrival to the maze of sand surrounding the Pleiades Watchtower, the Agoria sand dunes. In the Agoria sand dunes, there was a particularly famous sand time, in which the sand wind would blow particularly strong. The sand wind that would blow 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and night, would carry sand and miasma from the east towards the west, a disaster that would silently creep up on people. This sand wind would be especially strong at the midnight hour, and it would continue to blow for a few hours, as it was pretty much midnight, so at this time when the sand wind blew, their movement would be stifled. Thus, they would conquer the Augurious sand dunes during the day, little by little, with a few hours of break in the morning and afternoon, at the times the sand wind would blow. The grains of sand that covered the ground were minuscule, and just like the rumors had stated, it was terribly difficult to keep their footing, causing them to trip. Their march was slow as a crawl, an irritating situation all around. There was something about that situation which disappointed Subaru. That was...
There's the pain of this sand wind, not to mention the poor footing, but it isn't as bad as I thought.
Face away from the wind blowing, he pulled up the mouthcloth to secure his breathing. He faintly felt his teeth biting the sand, but this type of baptism was not very different from his time at Marula. The flying sand created a view of yellow, and he felt the sand tickling him in his clothes, but that was as far as its effects went. The fury of the dunes was insignificant.
When I first heard about the dunes, I even prepared myself on the assumption that it'd be deadly.
It's because of the natural environment that there's nothing green in here, in fact. The miasma kills anything and everything, so it only has this sort of scenery spread out, I suppose. That is why rain even pours on these sand dunes, and the temperature doesn't go extremely out of control, in fact.
Subaru had a strong impression of the desert being a red-hot hell. He'd never stepped foot into a desert back in his other world, but in mediums like games and manga, the deserts all yielded impressions of hot sand. For that reason, the severity of the Augurious sand dunes was pleasant in comparison to what he had initially imagined.
It wasn't hot or cold at the nearest town, so I guess it'd be weird for the sand dunes to be an extremely hot hell. So, we only need to be careful of the wind and the witch beasts.
As well as getting lost, I suppose.
One worry had disappeared, but Beatrice pulled on Subaru's feelings of optimism. In response to the point made by the girl in his arms, Subaru looked forward while being careful of the wind. The Watchtower, its existence ever present, looms still in Subaru's line of sight.
You bring up the question of getting lost, but it seems unnatural to miss that thing.
Betty thinks so too, in fact. However, it wouldn't surprise me if something happened, I suppose. I don't know what type of cheat the Sage is, but the fact that nobody has ever reached them is proof, in fact.
Of course, Subaru had no intentions of underestimating things. Realistically speaking, it would be unlikely that they would miss their target considering it was a structure that huge, never mind getting lost. However, any prior challengers would have most likely thought the same thing. Despite those thoughts in mind, he figured that there should have been a reason as to why they had still not reached it. Anything could happen. Just like Beatrice had pointed out, this was that sort of witchy place.
About that, I guess it's about time we set up the next insurance plan.
Holding his breath, Subaru looked back at the terrain they had just traversed. On the sandy soil, the footsteps of Patrasche, on whom Subaru and Beatrice were riding, had been left behind, one by one. However, only the very latest ones would remain. And in time, too, they would be washed away, replaced and hidden by the sand. Nature itself had concocted such a natural trap. Never mind the watchtower at the front. The path they had traveled thus far would be hidden from them in exiguous fashion. However, that would only be true if these people were only able to take normal measures.
Seems like the previous one's out of sight. Alright, this is a good time.
Subaru pulled on the bridle, directing Patrasche to veer towards the dragon carriage running parallel to them. The wheels of the dragon carriage also left traces, as did the ground dragon's spike-shaped footprints, but those were subjected to the same conditions as Patrasche's. Thus, they had to devise something as a mark to follow.
Emilia time, please!
Yeah, got it!
When he knocked on the dragon carriage from the outside, Emilia answered and showed up on the other side of the door. Emilia's whole body had been covered with a white robe for the sand, and Subaru, behind her, was gazing and pointing at something in the far distance, a certain something that was faintly reflected in his eyes.
I'm sorry for working you so hard, but please help us out, Sensei!
Well, I've got Subaru watching me, so it's not a big problem. What do you mean by sensei?
It's the template you use when making a request. Oh, and please.
Got it. I've been requested. Hey!
A brief, light-hearted exchange. She looked at the place Subaru was pointing towards. Emilia raised a listless, shouting voice, the look in her eyes too cute to call it glare, and her magical power surged. Immediately after, an enormous amount of mana swirled into Emilia's palm, and the magical power dashed swiftly through the sky, giving off the sense that its power increased as it accelerated. The sound it produced was like the very air had exploded, and it resounded throughout the vicinity. And then, after a few seconds, a huge ice tower stood on the path of the sandy plain.
Yeah, that was good.
Confirming that the task was finished, Emilia smiled, looking somewhat satisfied with herself. It wasn't comparable in size to the Pleiades Watchtower, but it was still a very conspicuous silhouette for the Agoria sand dunes. And so, an ice tower had been erected here and there along the route Subaru and the others had taken inside the Agoria sand dunes, in successive intervals such as they would not lose sight of the path.
The footprints can't work as markers, but some can be made with a more conspicuous method. This is how to use magic, eh?
Even so, Subaru's plan is very impressive. Nice thinking.
This method wouldn't be any good if the sand dunes were hot.
Emilia created with her magic was fragile to temperature, perhaps because it didn't go against the laws of nature. Based on that knowledge, were this a genuine desert, then maybe such a forbidden move would not have worked. However, it was a valid plan in these sand dunes. Emilia's standing ice tower was functioning as a landmark without a hitch. Worst case scenario, if something really did happen that would force them to withdraw, they should be able to follow them and retreat.
This tower. Yeah, it looks stable to stand on, but I'm still scared of it possibly toppling over, though. Since its foundation seems to be on something fluid.
I think it's been pinned to the ground as hard as possible, so it's all hunky-dory. You're worried?
Who even says hunky-dory these days? Alright.
Sighed his worry by teasing Emilia and raised his head. Emilia seemed a little displeased with that response, and he responded to her with a wry smile. After that, he looked over Emilia's shoulder, towards the inside of the dragon carriage behind her. For everyone inside, it should be the same as usual, but there was one person that he would rather not see remaining the same.
Where's Anastasia?
What is it, Natsuki-kun? Looking for me?
Immediately after his gaze had wandered, Subaru jumped upon being called by a person's voice. Cutting into his line of sight, Anastasia peeked out from a bit to the side of Emilia. She looked down on a surprised Subaru, her teal eyes squinted ever so slightly.
No need to get startled that much. Ain't I deliberately staying inside?
I know that you were inside, but it was shocking because I didn't expect you to appear from Emilia's armpit like you're growing out of it.
Hey, Subaru! I really didn't like the way you said that.
Unusual for me, too, to be annoyed by something like that. What a coincidence.
Emilia and Anastasia showing some distaste, Subaru got back on track. There was Beatrice shrugging her shoulders in his arms, but he turned to Anastasia for now.
We'll be relying on your knowledge to conquer the sand dunes. Please guide us well, okay?
Natsuki-kun sure is a worrywart. I'll be with you, so the outcome of this journey is the same for us two. There's no way I'd try and cut corners, you know? Don't you worry.
Is it possible for someone to believe a fuck so nonchalantly, I suppose?
Replying to Anastasia's words, Beatrice spoke with a voice so low that it could only be heard by Subaru. He was in complete agreement, but it would be wrong to provoke her by using that basis. If he was going to say that, then opting to go on this campaign towards the Watchtower would have been a mistake in the first place. As of now, they should be using up all their strength to fulfill their respective roles without complaining.
Right. Anastasia.
Yes, Natsuki-kun. If something happens, I'll let Julius know, and once we come near the place Echidna spoke about, I'll report that too. Don't worry, yeah?
Anastasia, or rather Aridna, did not seem displeased by Subaru's cynical beckoning. It seemed like there would be no problem moving forward like this, for the moment being.
It seems like the wind has gotten stronger. Subaru, if there's nothing else, then I'm going to close it, but...
Go ahead, Emilia-san. I'll leave the people inside up to you.
Yeah, leave it to me. Subaru, you'll be nice to Beatrice too.
No need to worry about that, I suppose. I'm satisfied, in fact.
Emilia put her hand on the door, and after an exchange of words, she went back inside and left. Beatrice responded to Emilia's last joke with a light remark. The latter's smile disappeared, blocked by the door. She now went around to the front of the dragon carriage, appearing next to the driver's box.
It appears like Emilia-sama's landmarks are working properly. You're as clever as always.
You can call it guile, you know.
I shan't. I'm jealous of your adaptability, being able to come up with ideas myself and others cannot with such ease. I really cannot craft these sort of evil ways.
Guile sounds cuter than evil ways!
Sat on the driver's box, and he had a faint smile on his face, so faint that it was barely visible. A white cloth was wrapped around his handsome face, so his expression couldn't be seen. But even then, as they had been talking with each other this past month, Subaru could understand how much he was joking based on the tone of his voice.
Meili, how about you? Doing your job?
You're gonna ask me that? Oni-san hasn't ran into a single bad animal chance even once, and neither has the dragon carriage. Is that not proof of me working?
Upon peeking into the driver's box, he saw Meili pouting, just as he expected. She was also wearing a cloak around her head because of the sand wind, and she answered Subaru's questions with a displeased-sounding voice. In reaction to Meili's answer, Subaru wiped the sand off his head while regarding the path ahead.
Even if you say that, it's hard to see the results of your hard work. I don't know if the witch bees haven't showed up because of you, or if they just aren't around here.
So that's what you're gonna say?
Subaru said a careless thing, being disappointed by the high anticipations he possessed, as so far they had not faced any obstacles other than the sand and the wind. Immediately, Meili spoke with a low-toned voice, putting her cheeks in between her hands as if thinking of something as she sunk into silence. Subaru honestly had a bad feeling about that.
Subaru, apologize to her. It is clear that you have just said something improper.
You don't have to tell me. I know. Meili! I kinda was a bit mean now. Well, not kinda, completely. Please don't be in a bad mood. I wasn't trying to be mean.
Okay, it's fine. It's not like I'm mad or anything, but I think there's a reason for what Oni-san said too.
Oh, that's good. Thankfully, you are much more mature than you look.
So I'll make it clear, that's why I'm here.
Meili interrupted Subaru's explanation and apology, and uttered some extremely disturbing words. The unsettling sound caused Subaru and Julius to look at each other, and hurried to form a sentence that would appease her. It was immediately after that. Patrasche and the dragon carriage's ground dragon both stepped hard on the ground, halting their movement. The ground dragon's instincts had rapidly sensed something approaching them, alerting their master, the one holding the reins. Then, Subaru and Julius opened their eyes at the same time. There, they saw it.
Huh?
In front of their eyes, the sandy surface suddenly began wriggling as if it possessed a will of its own, and something wriggling immediately came crawling out from beneath the sands. A terrifying animal, with a large amount of sand clinging onto its whole body, let out an unbelievably piercing cry from its gigantic mouth. Neither arms nor legs were present on its body, and the way it bent its long and fat body back and forth was reminiscent of a snake. However, it had slimy-looking skin, its color similar to that of the sand, patterned with carved, equidistant lateral stripes, carrying along a horrible stench. Subaru only noticed its true identity once the head of the thing lowered. It was no snake. This was an earthworm. Its torso was so massive that Subaru could not wrap his arms around it. In fact, it seemed that its head and mouth were large enough to swallow 4 or 5 humans whole. The stink surrounding it was similar to a rotten smell, and the saliva, dripping from maw lined with fine teeth, made noise as it evaporated on the sand. The eyeless head turned towards them, acting as if it was sniffing the smell. At this moment, Subaru had completely forgotten about breathing. He also felt Patrasche's thoughts blanking, being transmitted across the bridle, and Beatrice grabbed strongly onto Subaru's clothes while still in his arms. As soon as he thought of its sense of smell, Subaru remembered the smell of the witch that he had carried. If the witch beast reacted to that, something else reacted to it. This group would be...
Ah, jeez! You stink! Hurry up and leave! Get lost!
In the presence of Subaru and the others who could not avoid letting their fear show, Meili let out an adequate voice. Those words caused the gigantic earthworm to turn towards Meili, but he immediately listened to that little girl's orders, and the giant body crawled back into the hole it had dug. A few seconds later, the hole that the earthworm came from had been completely covered with sand, and only silence reigned within the area.
That was a sand earthworm, most likely. It is a witch beast that prefers to lurk beneath sandy soil, but it was a little bigger than I thought.
A little? How little?
To my knowledge, I thought that they would have been as big as a male adult's arms.
Even if the earthworm that appeared was of that size, it would still be big enough to pose a grotesque threat. But that sand earthworm was hundreds to thousands of times larger than the one in Julius's knowledge. It was said that the witch beasts native to the Auguria sand dunes were more ferocious, but perhaps they should have considered the difference in scale as well. Anyhow.
What was that loud voice?
A small window belonging to the dragon carriage opened, and Emilia showed her face from the window that connected the driver box to the inside of the carriage. Even if she had not witnessed the sand earthworm, she would have heard the witch beast's roar. Emilia looked worried, but Subaru was incapable of speaking right away. Then Meili took Subaru's place as he tensed up and faced Emilia.
No need to worry. I just wanted to let you guys know how blessed you are because you don't need to worry about a thing.
Jeez! We really can't thank you enough, Meili-san!
He loosened up thanks to Meili's words, and Subaru gave her a generous compliment that came from the bottom of his heart. Emilia seemed astonished at that change. After Meili's own surprise, she immediately appeared to be satisfied.
Really? You sure? Does Oni-san see me in a new light now?
Yeah, I seriously respect you. I sincerely felt just how dangerous this place would be had you not come along. The Auguria sand dunes are scary! Scary!
He now understood one reason as to why the many reckless adventurers had not come back after daring to conquer this place. Indeed, it was certainly a place for reckless people. It was the absurdity of fooling themselves by believing that the baptism of the sand dunes would be easy. Hooray for peace. Peace is the best.
You're flattering her quite a lot, I suppose. Disgusting, in fact.
Shut up! Weren't you scared out of your wits too? Scary.
Then he was only going along with Subaru because you were nervous, I suppose. Don't get the wrong idea, in fact.
Don't act so tough. You pissed yourself a little, just like I did. Right? I can tell.
Pissed, I suppose?
It like a comedy episode, but nobody could blame them for it at the time. It seemed like witch beasts would approach them if they caused a fuss, but the power of the being who conquered that had been adequately proven. Thus, even Julius did not attempt to stop their quarrel. However, he simply readjusted his consciousness, realizing that the ice they were walking on was thinner than he imagined. This was the first day of the conquering of the sand dunes, to which they could look back as having been worth it. Suddenly, Light ran through the sky and penetrated the wind. With a violent sound, the ice tower shattered in half and crumbled, having been hit directly. The pulverized ice tower immediately returned to mana, and every little bit of it that fell onto the surface was swallowed by the sand, disappearing from the world without any ruin, without a trace. The light continued several more times, darting through the sky in succession. Coincidentally, the number matched the number of times the silver-haired girl had established an ice tower. Nobody knew what that meant at this point of time. However, the conquest of the labyrinth of sand was by no means a simple matter. That much was an established fact.